Scottish poet Harry Josephine Giles, author of the Arthur C. Clarke award-winning science fiction epic poem Deep Wheel Orcadia, once told me, because I asked her in a Q&A section at the end of an event, that she enjoys writing poetry that intersects the transgender experience with nature poetry because nature is weird. Nature is sometimes beautiful and sometimes terrifying, but by its very definition, everything in nature is natural. Everything from evolution and life cycles down to mating, eating, giving birth and dying, it's all so strange and it's all so beautiful and it's all so wonderful. And in my opinion, the writers of science fiction and the writers of horror fiction both understand this truth, that everything in our world is frightening and beautiful and strange and mysterious and wonderful. And for that exact reason, science fiction and horror are a match made in heaven. And since I just got done reading 2 science fiction horror books back to back, both of which embrace everything I've just said, I want to talk about the magic that is this intersection between science fiction and horror. Now, I personally have been in love with both of these genres as far back as I can remember, and the marriage of these 2 genres also goes back a long, long way. One of the best science fiction films ever made is also one of the best horror films ever made, Ridley Scott's Alien, which is easily one of my favorite films. And another favorite of mine, which is a bit more schlocky, a little bit more cult, a little less mainstream than Alien, is Event Horizon. Both of these films are science fiction horror, and both of them lean on the idea of the universe being a mysterious place. Now, whenever I talk about Alien, I have to kind of hold myself back because as a critic, I want to talk about the wonderful feminist metaphors in Alien, but that's kind of been done to death. If you're a fan of Alien, you probably know all of the wonderful feminist imagery and metaphors at play. Instead, I'm going to bring everything down, make everything a bit more simple, and just talk about the genius of that first Alien film and how that genius hinges on strangeness and mystery. In the years since Alien was first released, the mythology of the xenomorph has grown and grown and grown. But that first film is a claustrophobic, nail-biting predator-prey story, wherein a strange alien creature that seems unbeatable and perfectly engineered to be the ultimate predator preys on a group of people. In Ridley Scott's original Alien, the alien is so enticing and exciting and frightening because we don't know much about it, because it is draped in mystery, it hides in the shadows. Its biology is so intriguing, its physical aesthetic design is so exciting and otherworldly. Every time you catch a glimpse of it, you wonder, what is this thing? Where did it come from? How does it work? Blah, blah, blah. Big questions. And moving on to Event Horizon, that film is a lot more eldritch. It presents us with a very simple idea that expands on that idea in the most fun and strange way possible. If you were to take space and fold it, and pass into one hole and out through another, that gap in the middle that you've just passed through is a different dimension. What is it? Where is it? Well, it's hell. And that's so fucking cool. Event Horizon is very obviously inspired by the works of H.P. Lovecraft, who arguably is the progenitor of everything I'm talking about here. H.P. Lovecraft, as we all know, was a terrible, terrible racist. And he was also a talented writer who created an entire genre that we still obsess over today. The genre of cosmic horror. An incredible blend between the mysteries of science fiction and the horror of the unknown. Because that's it, right? Both of these genres hinge on mystery and strangeness and the hope for answers, the hope to understand things. So many horror stories of so many different horror genres hinge on not knowing something being a mystery, something being held back, something unknown and frightening, something that is scary simply because you don't know what it is or where it is or why it is. But the same is so often true about science fiction. Maybe there's an alien invasion. Maybe some strange thing was discovered. Maybe there's evidence of time travel from the future. Something that is related to scientific possibility has come along to confuse us, to intrigue us, to make us want to know more and expand our understanding of exciting mysteries. Science fiction and horror both hinge on the unknown. But as Harry Josephine Giles said right back at the beginning of this video, these two genres also hinge on strangeness, on the uneasy weirdness that is the world itself, nature, the universe, the forces that connect us. All of these things can be utilized by science fiction and horror. And that is exactly what Gareth Powell did with his novel Future's Edge. Future's Edge is a 300-page science fiction novel that blends elements of body horror to ramp up the mysteries and the strangeness and the unease of everything that you read. One of the most frightening things about this book is the fact that it's set not very far in the future. And that's also true about the other book I'm going to talk about. The idea that these things could be so close, just on the horizon, something that we could see in our lifetimes. I know it's fiction, but planting that idea in your mind that all of this is something that could possibly be seen, lived through, suffered through is probably a better way to put it. That's all extremely frightening. See, Future's Edge takes place after humanity has all but ended. A strange and mysterious race that humanity have come to call the Cutters have invaded and destroyed Earth. Most of the humans that are left live on refugee colonies scattered around the galaxy. And our protagonist, Ursula, is a human living on one of these colonies. Before the destruction of Earth, she was an archaeologist. And just a few years ago, she went to a dig site on a far-off planet. And there she discovered a strange artifact, which was clearly left there by some ancient and yet advanced race of beings. And when she inadvertently touched it, it changed her very DNA. After she recovered from the encounter, she found that she was almost unkillable. But now she's been living on this refugee planet for 2 years, and suddenly her ex-fiancé has flown in on his ship, which he ended up marrying. It's not as weird as it sounds. And he's come looking for her because he's discovered that the thing that she discovered might just help humanity in their fight against the Cutters, whatever those things might be. And from here, the story starts to feel eerily similar to that of the Mass Effect video games. If you've played them, that's enough of an explanation. If you haven't, well, see, in this book, once humanity started exploring the stars, they discovered these invisible pathways that can shoot you across the galaxy from one planet to another. These things exist in what's called the undervoid, a kind of dimension that sits just underneath ours. You access it and you are shot across the galaxy and you arrive at your destination. And slowly, as the book goes on, people start to piece things together and wonder if the advanced ancient race that left the artifact that Ursula discovered also maybe created these pathways. But then what does that have to do with the Cutters? Well, I can't really say much more without spoiling things because this is one of those books that constantly provides you with new context and new ideas. Our characters are always discovering more and more about the invading races, about ancient forgotten people. There's always more going on. Constantly things are building and building and building. And in that sense of mystery and discovery lies that wonderful intersection between science fiction and horror. The Cutters, whatever they are an invading species that wiped out so much of humanity. That is terrifying. We don't know where they come from. We don't know what they are. We don't know how they think or why they do the things that they do. And that in itself is an incredible existential terror. And then of course there is the body horror. What happened to Ursula and what she can be put through as a result. The idea that scientific advancements and discoveries can have a profound impact on the human body is exciting, but also terrifying. And the changes that happen are terrifying as well. Think back to Frankenstein, which is a work of science fiction horror. I said that H.P. Lovecraft started this whole thing, but of course it was Mary Shelley because she's the best thing that's ever happened to anyone ever. I love her so much. In case you don't know much about me or my channel, Frankenstein is my favorite book, and yeah, that makes sense now, right? Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is a lot of things. It's a book about fatherhood and abandonment. It's a book book about morals, but it's also, at its most basic read, Frankenstein is the story of science gone too far, right? That's the one thing that everybody knows and understands about Frankenstein, even if they've never read it. When one scientist pushes the boundaries of science and creates something frightening, something that many would call an abomination. But of course, as anyone who loves Frankenstein as much as I do will understand, it's a lot more than that. Like, so much more, but we don't have time for that. The point is that scientific discovery and experimentation, especially when it comes to nature and the human body, is grotesque and frightening, and Gareth Powell reminds us of that in Future's Edge. In Overgrowth, Mira Grant does something similar and yet entirely different. To be blunt here, Overgrowth is one of the best books I've read in quite a while. I absolutely love this blend of science fiction and horror, and every single person who reads this book is going to compare it to Invasion of the Body Snatchers and Little Shop of Horrors. So much so that those two films are constantly referenced in the text itself. Mira Grant knows this, and so she leans into it, and it's fun. It adds a kind of 80s B-movie schlock to the whole tone of the book. Overgrowth is set 5 years from now. And it follows a woman from Seattle called Anastasia. Well, kind of. She's kind of a woman. She's kind of a person. See, when she was 3 years old, Anastasia actually died. There is no Anastasia anymore. Kind of. I know, it's weird. 32 years before the events of the novel, a 3-year-old girl named Anastasia walked into the woods behind her grandparents' house in Washington state. There she went to pick a flower. But little did she know that that flower was actually an alien sent from a distant galaxy, one of many flowers that was sent to Earth. Upon touching it, the flower unleashed a whole bunch of vines that wrapped Anastasia up into a cocoon, sucked all the blood out of her, kind of scanned her DNA, and created a perfect copy. Now, that perfect copy, which is in fact an alien, processes all of her memories and her experiences and wanders back to her house. And from that moment onwards, every single time Anastasia meets anybody, she explains that she is in fact the envoy of an invading alien species who are on their way to Earth to invade us. She says it all the time. She is coded to say it. And so she had to go through a lot of therapy, and it was difficult for her to make friends, and everyone thinks she's a bit weird. But now she's 35, she's got a boyfriend, she lives in a shared house with a bunch of friends, she's got a steady job, she's living her life. She is Anastasia, but she also knows at the back of her mind that she is the envoy of an invading alien species, of plant people. And for the majority of this novel, we follow the 35-year-old Anastasia in the weeks leading up to this invasion, because the aliens have just sent a message to Earth. It was intercepted by an amateur astronomer who broadcast it to the entire world, and Anastasia is the only person who could understand it. Because it's all true. It's all real. The reason I say that is because until that point, you kind of wonder, is this all happening? Am I being gaslit? Is there going to be a twist where Anastasia's actually just insane, or it's a metaphor for something? No. This is a real alien invasion, and it is happening. And Anastasia really is an alien. So you can immediately see how this sci-fi novel is very Invasion of the Body Snatchers, very Little Shop of Horrors, but it's also very War of the Worlds. The book is separated into multiple parts, and at the start of each part we get a quote from H.G. Wells. And that's really important because War of the Worlds is a novel about colonialism. H.G. Wells was an anti-colonialist British person living at the tail end of the Victorian period. The Martians in War of the Worlds are simply a metaphor for the British Empire and all of the damage that it has done across the planet. And with Overgrowth, Mira Grant is doing something very similar. This is an incredibly savvy book when it comes to the idea of alien invasion. It's not necessarily doing that much new, but at the same time it is. Because War of the Worlds existed within its own time. It could only be inspired by by what Wells experienced. Whereas this book is coming out in 2025, and it has a lot of new ideas that Grant is sharing with us. It is inspired by our time and all of the experiences that have gone on. The American imperial system, not just the British one. And then, of course, there's the horror. The fact that our protagonist is an alien, and as time goes on, as the invasion gets closer, her alien biology becomes more and more apparent. It sort of moves to the surface. And it's not a spoiler to say that. Look at the cover. This cover is absolutely stunning, but it is also a warning for what's to come. This is the kind of thing you're going to see in this book. And something that I find particularly interesting and admirable about this book is that, unlike something like Alien, which feels like a sci-fi movie and a horror movie, Overgrowth instead feels like a science horror fiction story. It is not sci-fi and horror, it's sci-fi horror. The mystery of this invading alien space is equal parts exciting in a sci-fi sense and terrifying in a horror sense. It kind of reminds me, actually, of Doctor Who. I've recently been getting back into Doctor Who, and something that I fully forgot about that show is that it's frightening. When my parents were children, they couldn't watch Doctor Who because it was too scary. We so often refer to Doctor Who as a fun and exciting sci-fi show, but it is terrifying. There are so many scary things about Doctor Who. So many episodes are specifically horror themed. The science fiction that is explored in that show is scary. The mystery and the strangeness of it is terrifying, and exactly the same can be said about this. Overgrowth is exactly as scary as it is exciting. There are so many creepy elements to it, but you can't deny how exciting it all is. Which takes me right back to the beginning, with mystery. Mystery is at the heart of both of these genres, and because of that, you can merge them together so seamlessly. The strange unknown of the universe, the weirdness of nature, the impossibility of everything that exists that we don't know about, it is exactly as exciting as it is scary. And for that reason, science fiction and horror are a match made in heaven. So I am very curious, are there any science fiction horror stories in film or in literature that I don't know about, that I haven't mentioned, that you'd like to recommend to me? Except for Danny Boyle's Sunshine. I already know about that film and I'm already a big fan. I don't know why that film is so underrated. When we talk about Danny Boyle, we don't talk about Sunshine, and I don't know why. It was so good. Anyway, give me some sci-fi horror recommendations, film or book. I want them all in the comments just under the like button. And also, you'll find a link to my book that you should buy. This thing here, my book. Buy it, read it. It's horror, and it's really good. Subscribe for books.